We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara from Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 25a. This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor an Amud or a daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, there was a machlokas amoraim. Why is it that a mesachik bekuvya, somebody who plays with dice, is not allowed to be a witness? Rami Bar Chama said the reason is because when a person is gambling, that's like an asmachta. The person does not actually think he's going to lose, and therefore taking the money would be stealing. That's why he's prohibited from being a witness. And Rav Shesha says the reason is because he's not b'yishuvo shalolim. He's not dealing with the settling of the world. He doesn't have a regular job. And the Gemara had asked on Rami Bar Chama that Rabbi Yehuda at the end of the Mishnah says exactly the reason of Rav Shesha. That seems to be a question against Rami Bar Chama. And the Gemara says maybe you'll say that Rabbi Yehuda is actually arguing on the Chachamim in the Mishnah, but that's not true because Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says anytime Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah Emasai uvameh, anytime he says when is something true, or the word bameh also means in what situation is it true. He's only coming to explain the Chachamim, and so therefore he's not arguing. He's actually explaining the Chachamim, and the Chachamim agree. And Rabbi Yochanan says Emasai lefarish. The word Emasai, that is coming to explain the Chachamim. Uvameh lachlok, but the word bameh is coming to argue. And so therefore again with the Kuli Alma, but everybody seems to agree Emasai lefarishu, that the word Emasai is an explanation, and the Chachamim do not disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, and so therefore it would mean that everybody in the Mishnah is against Rami Bar Chama. And the Gemara says to that, Gavra agavra karamis, you're asking one person against the other person. Mar savar pligi, one might say that Rabbi Yehuda argues in the Mishnah on the Chachamim, or Mar savar lo pligi, and the other one says they don't argue. Rashi explains, Gavra agavra Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rami Bar Chama, you're using Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's approach to understanding Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, you're asking that as a question on Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama savar, Emasai Rabbi Yehuda, lachlok, but Rami Bar Chama will simply say that Rabbi Yehuda is coming to argue even though he uses the word Emasai. But the Gemara continues, V'lo pligi, is it possible to say that the Chachamim are not arguing on Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah? Vatanya, but we have a brisa which says, Bein sheyesh lo umnus shalohu, bein she'ein lo umnus elahu, whether he has some other profession, or whether this is his only profession to gamble, hareza pasal, he is disqualified. And so that would make it clear that there is a Tana that holds that the reason has nothing to do with Yeshuva Shalom, but it has to do with the fact of Asmachta, presumably, as Rami Bar Chama said. And the Gemara says, that's not a proof to the Chachamim, because Ahi, Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfani, that Bryce actually is a third opinion altogether. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Tarfan. That has nothing to do with the Chachamim in our Mishnah. It could be the Chachamim in our Mishnah agree with Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. And Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Tarfan says, the Tanya, as we learned in a Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfan, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Tarfan, Liolam Ein Echad Mehen Nazir, really one of them is not going to be a Nazir, Lefishalon Nitna Naziros Ela Lahafla, because by Nazir it has to be lahafla, it has to be a clear pronouncement. And Rashi explains, Zahid Rabbi Yehuda hi mishum Rabbi Tarfan liolam emasai lefarishu. It could be that emasai is explaining, but Rabbanan demasnisan lo pligiola, and the Rabbanan in the Mishnah don't argue on Rabbi Yehuda. Umasnisa dekatani ben sheyesh lo v'chulu, and the brisa which seems to be bringing an opposing view, it doesn't matter if he has another profession or not. Demashma time mishum asmachta, that sounds like the reason is because of asmachta. Rabbi Yehuda gufei amram mishmeid Rabbi Tarfan, that's actually Rabbi Yehuda himself quoting Rabbi Tarfan, Upaligad Rabbanan the Masnisan, and that actually would argue on the Rabbanan in our Mishnah. The Taimayim Misham Yishav, they say it is because of the settling of the world. Of Masnisan Rabbi Yehuda Milsayu the Rabbanan Kamafarish, and again it could be that in the Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda is explaining the Rabbanan. And what does Rabbi Tarfan say? He says Ein Echad Mehen Nazir, one of them is not a Nazir, meaning Shnayim Yoshvin. Let's say you have two people sitting, V'echad over, and then there's some person passing by them. Zeh Omer Ploni over Nazir. This one says this person passing by is a Nazir. V'zeh Omer Eino Nazir. The other one says he's not a Nazir. V'yamar echad, and then one of them says Hareini Nazir im kemosahu, shehu Nazir. He says I am a Nazir if it's like him that he's a Nazir. V'chaveru Omer Hareini Nazir im kemosahu, she'eino Nazir. The other one says I'll be a Nazir if he's correct that this person is not a Nazir. Ushneim miskavlin l'naziris, and both of them are saying they're going to be a Nazir. V'nimtza ke'echad mehem, and one of them turns out to be right. V'yamar Rabbi Tarfan says on that Ein echad mehen Nazir. In this case, neither of them is a Nazir, even though one of them turned out to be correct in his pronouncement of making himself a Nazir. Why? Shal ha-safek amar devarav tchila, because when the person is saying he's going to be a Nazir if such and such, he's saying that based on a doubt. He doesn't know what the result will be. Ve'ein zu hafla, and that's not called hafla, which means you have to have a clear pronouncement of Naziros. Yafli ish yefarish mashma. That's what yafli ish. That's what it implies. Almol Rabbi Tarfon, in any case, you see from Rabbi Tarfon, anytime you have some kind of stipulation and you don't know the result, we say that that's considered to be an asmachta. We don't say, well, it's a doubt, and so therefore he's committing himself. No, that's not considered to be a real commitment. We assume that the person in such a situation, it's considered to be an asmachta. He thought that the result would go a certain way, and that's considered an asmachta. And so you see Rabbi Tarfon holds of this concept of asmachta, and that's the explanation in this case of the people who gamble. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Malva beribis, those who lend for interest, they're disqualified from being witnesses. Amar Rava says, Lova beribis posel edus, even a person who borrows with interest is also disqualified to be a witness. The Gemara says, V'anon tanan malva beribis, but doesn't it say in our Mishnah, one who lends, it doesn't say one who borrows. And the Gemara answers to that, Milva habo beribis, it just means anyone who's involved in a loan with interest. And the Gemara continues, Bar benitos asidu beitrei sahadi, Bar benitos, there were two witnesses that testified about him. Chadamar kami didi ozif beribi. So one said, in front of me, I saw that he lent with interest. V'chadamar, and the other one said, lididi ozvi beribisa. He actually lent me the money with interest. So you have two witnesses in any case testifying that he lent with interest. So pasle Rava lebar benitos. So Rava disqualified Bar benitos from being a witness. But the Gemara asks on this, V'harava hudamar lova beribis pasal edus. Doesn't Rava say that if someone borrows with interest, he can't be an aid, he can't be a witness? V'havale rasha, he's considered a rasha. V'hatorah amral tashes rasha aid. The Torah says a rasha cannot be an aid. The problem over here is that one of these witnesses said that he lent me money with interest. Now, by saying that, he's rendering himself somebody who can't be a witness, so his whole testimony should be thrown out. So why are we accepting the testimony and saying that therefore Bar benitos is not allowed to be a witness? And the Gemara answers to that, Rava l'taime, Rava is following his opinion. The Amar Rava, because Rava says, Adam karov eitzalatzmo, a person is considered a relative when he's testifying about himself. Ve'en adam meisam atzmo rasha, a person can't make himself into a rasha, so we actually don't accept that part of the testimony where this aid, this witness is saying that he borrowed. We're just accepting the part of the testimony where he says that this person, Bar benitos, he lent the money with ribis. Rashi explains, Rava l'taime beparakama de'en adam meisam atzmo eino yachol lifsol atzmo, a person cannot disqualify himself al piv through his own testimony. Da'in karov meid lo lezachus v'lo lechova v'yadam karov eitzalatzmo. Again, a person can't testify as a relative. A person is a relative to himself, so to speak, and therefore we ignore that part of the testimony, and this aid is not considered rasha. We accept his testimony in terms of Bar benitos. And the Gemara continues, how ta'afcha, there was a butcher, dishtakach the nafka treifsa mitusa yade. It turns out that he was selling animals that were treif. Pasle Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman therefore disqualified him. V'yavre, and he also removed him from his position. Azal Ravi Mazi v'tufre, so the person went ahead and he grew out his hair, he grew out his fingernails. Essentially, he showed signs of teshuva. Rashi says, Ravi Mazi v'tufre higdil saru, grew out his hair, v'tzipornav, and his fingernails, l'navel atzmo, in order to make himself that he doesn't look good, lastos teshuva, to indicate that he was doing teshuva, he was repenting for his ways. And so the Gemara continues, Savar Rav Nachman lachshure, so Rav Nachman thought that we should make him kosher again, he should be allowed to be a witness, and again we should put him back in his position. Amar le Rava said to him, Dilma irume kamarim, but maybe he's just acting this way purposely, it's not real teshuva, he's tricking us into believing he's doing teshuva because he wants to be reinstated. Elamai takante, and so the Gemara says, rather, what is the solution? How can he really show that he's doing teshuva? Kidur Ravidi bar Avin, it's like Ravidi bar Avin, Diyamar Ravidi bar Avin says, Hachosher al trefa, somebody who's suspected when it comes to trefas, ein lo takana, at sheyelech l'makom shein makirna, so there's no solution unless he goes to a place where they don't recognize him. V'yachzer aveda b'davar chashav, and he returns a lost object that's very valuable. O sheyotzi treifa mitachas yado b'davar chashav mishalo, or let's say he takes a treifa from his possession, from out of his possession, with something that's very valuable. Again, he's willing to give himself a loss of money and not make money on this treifa. If he does that in an area where they don't recognize him, that's considered to be teshuva. Rashi explains, shein makirno, so the teshuva dehasam lavi rumehu. If he's doing it in a place where they don't know him, so there he's not trying to trick anybody, then we can trust the teshuva. V'yachzer aveda im yimtza avedas chaveiro, if he finds an aveda, the kevan the machzer avedu vade hader bei mechem das mamon, if he's willing to return such a valuable aveda, it shows that he no longer desires money and is willing to profit in ways that are not appropriate. And the Gemara continues that the two dots mafricha yonim, those who fly the pigeons, they're also disqualified from being witnesses. And the Gemara says, "My mafricha yonim, what are mafricha yonim? Hacha tirgama itikadme yonach liyon." Here they explain it that the person says, if your dove beats my dove, essentially racing these birds, that's what the person is doing, a form of gambling. Rabbi Chama bar Oshia says, "Ora," it refers to someone who's called an Ora. Rashi says, "Ora melumid lahavi yonim mimakoman leveis bailam al karchan v'yeshbo." Gezel. He's training the doves to bring him other doves from other areas, and that's an issue of Gezel. He's stealing from these other people. And the Gemara continues, Man damar yitakadme yonach liyon, the one who says that the explanation is he's racing these pigeons. If your pigeon beats my pigeon in a race, my time will Amar Ara, why doesn't he say that the explanation is Ara? Amar Lach, he says to you, Ara mibnei darche shalom, and Ara is really just darche shalom bi'alma. It's really just because of darche shalom. That wouldn't be a reason to disqualify someone from being a witness. Rashi says, mibnei darche shalom bi'alma, detanya yonei shovach v'yonei aliyah, yesh ben gezel mibnei darche shalom. When you take these doves that are in the dove coats, that are in the upper areas, that's considered stealing, but only because of darche shalom we want to keep the peace. Below gezel gomer, it's not real gezel. Below zacha ben bal hashovach, the person who owns the dove coat is not really the owner. To memela ka'asu v'rabul, they just come there on their own, and so therefore that's not real stealing. That's why he doesn't want to say that that's the explanation of the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Uman damar Ara, the one who says the Ara is disqualified. My time alo amar itakan meyonach liyon. Why doesn't he explain the Mishnah is talking about racing the pigeons? Amar Lach, he will say to you, Hainu Mesechet Bekovya, because if you're talking about racing, that's identical to gambling with dice. Why would the Mishnah have two cases that are the same? V'idach, but the other one will respond, it's two different kind of cases. Tana tola b'das atzmo v'tana tola b'das yono. In the Mishnah we have cases b'das atzmo where he believes that he's able to roll the dice better, and then you have das yono where it's really reliant on the pigeon who's going to win in the race. So we have two different kinds of gambling. Utzrichan, we need to have them both in the Mishnah. The Tana tola b'das atzmo, because if we only had tola b'das atzmo, hasam hudalo gamaro makni damar. So over there, the person is not wholeheartedly really giving the money when he loses the gambling, because again, he thinks to himself that he knows how to do it better. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chafei Amid Beis.